Everyone thinks they know you after 5 minutes of conversation. They believe they've figured out your story, your ambitions, and your next move. But what if I told you that the most powerful people in history understood something you don't? They knew that mystery isn't about being secretive or playing games. It's about becoming genuinely fascinating. Niccolò Machiavelli didn't just write about power, he lived it. While everyone else was desperately trying to impress with their accomplishments and opinions, Machiavelli mastered something far more valuable. He understood that the moment people think they have you figured out, you lose all influence over them. The moment they believe they know everything about you, they stop paying attention. Here's what most people get wrong about personal magnetism. They think it's about being the loudest person in the room or having the most impressive resume. But watch how people react to someone truly intriguing. They lean in closer. They ask more questions. They remember that person long after everyone else has been forgotten. The truth is, we're living in an age of oversharing. Everyone broadcasts every thought, every meal, every emotion. In a world where people reveal everything, the person who reveals nothing becomes infinitely more interesting. But this isn't about being mysterious for mystery's sake. It's about understanding that curiosity is the most powerful force in human psychology. When you master the art of calibrated mystery, something remarkable happens. People start projecting their own fascination onto you. They begin to see depth where others see surface. They start attributing qualities to you that you never claimed to have. And the beautiful irony, the less you try to impress them, the more impressed they become. Today, we're going to explore how Machiavelli created an aura that made kings seek his counsel and enemies respect his intelligence, even when he had no army, no wealth, and no official title to his name. Number 1. The silence amplifier technique. Think back to the last conversation you had where someone asked you a personal question. What did you do? If you're like most people, you immediately started talking. You filled the space with words, explanations, and details about yourself. You gave them exactly what they asked for and probably more than they expected. But here's what you didn't realize was happening in that moment. The second you started explaining yourself, you handed over all the power in that interaction. You became the performer, and they became the audience. You transformed from someone worth knowing into someone they now completely understand. There's a hidden principle at work in every conversation that most people never discover. It's the principle that whoever talks more reveals more, and whoever reveals more holds less power. This isn't about manipulation or playing games. This is about understanding a fundamental truth of human psychology that has shaped every important relationship throughout history. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. When diplomats would arrive at his door demanding answers about Florence's military strategies, he wouldn't give speeches about their defensive capabilities. Instead, he would sit in perfect silence, watching their faces, studying their tells, until the pressure of that silence forced them to reveal their own intelligence first. The beauty of strategic silence is that it creates a vacuum that people feel compelled to fill. When you pause instead of immediately responding to a question about your background, something fascinating happens. The person asking begins to wonder what you're thinking. They start to project depth onto your pause. They assume you're considering something profound rather than simply choosing not to answer. But the real magic happens when you redirect that silence into a question about them. Instead of explaining where you went to school, you ask them about their educational experience. Instead of listing your job responsibilities, you inquire about their career journey. This does two powerful things simultaneously. It positions you as someone genuinely interested in understanding others, while keeping your own story locked away behind a wall of mystery. People remember conversations where they did most of the talking as the best conversations they've ever had. They walk away thinking you're brilliant, insightful, and fascinating, even though you barely said anything about yourself. This is because you gave them the rarest gift in our narcissistic world. You gave them your complete attention without demanding the same in return. Here's what makes this technique so powerful. When someone asks about your opinions and you respond with thoughtful silence, followed by a question about their perspective, you're not just avoiding revealing information. You're positioning yourself as the person in the room with enough confidence to let others shine. You become the mysterious figure who clearly has thoughts worth hearing, but chooses when and with whom to share them. This is technique number 1 of 5 that will completely transform how people perceive and remember you. Number 2, the incomplete story method. Every person you've ever found fascinating has done something that you probably never consciously noticed. They told you stories that didn't end. They shared experiences that cut off right before the resolution. They painted pictures of their life that always seemed to have missing pieces. This wasn't an accident. This was strategy. Most people make a critical error when sharing their experiences. They give you the complete story from beginning to end. They tell you about the challenge they faced, how they overcame it, what they learned, and how it changed them. By the time they finish talking, you know everything there is to know about that experience, and something interesting happens in your brain. You file that story away as complete and move on to thinking about something else. But what happens when someone tells you about a situation they encountered in Prague that taught them something important, then immediately changes the subject? Your brain doesn't file that away as complete. Instead, it creates an open file that keeps running in the background of your consciousness. Every time you see that person, part of your mind is still wondering about Prague. Machiavelli was the master of the incomplete revelation. He would mention his time in diplomatic missions with enough detail to establish credibility, then pivot to asking about someone else's experiences before anyone could ask for more information. He would reference lessons learned from unnamed advisors or insights gained from unspecified crises, always leaving people with more questions than answers. The incomplete story method works because of how human curiosity operates. When we hear a complete story, our curiosity is satisfied. But when we hear a story with missing pieces, our imagination fills in those gaps, and our own projections become part of what makes that person interesting to us. We become invested in the mystery because we've already invested mental energy in trying to solve it. Here's the sophisticated part. The stories you choose to leave incomplete should always suggest depth, experience, or knowledge that's relevant to the situation at hand. If you're in a business setting and you mention that a negotiation in Singapore taught you something valuable about reading people, then change the subject. You've established credibility while creating curiosity. People now know you have international business experience and insights about human behavior, but they don't know the details. And those unknown details become more intriguing than any complete story you could have told. The key is to plant these seeds naturally in conversation. When someone asks about your background, you might mention that you learned the most important lesson of your career during a project that almost failed completely. Then ask them about a challenge they've overcome. You've established that you have significant professional experience and hard-won wisdom, but the specifics remain mysterious. This technique transforms you from someone who shares everything into someone who clearly has much more to share, but chooses their moments carefully. People begin to see you as someone with a deeper story, someone worth getting to know better, someone whose complete trust would unlock fascinating insights. This is technique number 2 of 5, and it's already changing how people respond to your presence. Number 3, the expertise. Iceberg principle. There's a moment in every conversation when you can either blend into the background or become someone people remember for months. It's the moment when you have the opportunity to reveal depth that no one expected. Most people miss this moment completely. They either stay surface level and become forgettable, or they try to impress everyone with everything they know and come across as desperate for validation. But there's a third option that few people discover. It's the ability to drop a single insight so profound that it reframes how everyone sees you, then immediately move on as if that level of knowledge is completely normal for you. Watch what happens when someone casually mentions that the architectural principle behind a building you're walking past is the same psychological principle that makes certain conversations unforgettable, then immediately asks about your weekend plans. Your brain doesn't just hear architecture facts or psychology trivia. Your brain registers that this person operates on a level of thinking that connects seemingly unrelated fields of knowledge. Machiavelli perfected this approach in ways that made him legendary. During casual conversations about local politics, he would drop a single observation about how the current situation mirrored a specific Roman military strategy, then pivot to asking about someone's family. He didn't lecture about Roman history or political theory. He demonstrated depth through a momentary glimpse, then covered it back up like an iceberg, showing just its tip above water. The expertise iceberg principle works because of how our brains assess intelligence and depth in others. When someone explains everything they know about a topic, we measure them by how much they talk. But when someone reveals profound understanding in a single sentence, then moves on, we measure them by how much they're not saying. We assume their knowledge runs much deeper than what we've seen. Here's what makes this technique so powerful. The insight you share should connect two different areas of knowledge in a way that most people would never think to connect them. When you mention that the reason certain marketing campaigns fail is the same reason certain architectural styles feel uncomfortable, you're not just showing knowledge about marketing or architecture. You're showing a mind that sees patterns across different domains. The timing of when you reveal these insights is critical. It should feel organic to the conversation, not forced or attention-seeking. If someone mentions they're frustrated with a team project, you might observe that the same dynamic that ruins team chemistry in sports is probably happening in their workplace, then ask what specific behaviors they've noticed. You've demonstrated understanding of group psychology and sports dynamics, but you've used that knowledge to help them think about their situation differently. The immediate pivot away from your insight is what transforms it from showing off into demonstrating depth. When you drop that knowledge, then quickly focus attention back on the other person or change topics entirely, you're communicating that this level of thinking is routine for you. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're just operating from a deeper level of understanding. People start to wonder what else you know. They begin to see you as someone who probably has insights about many things, but chooses not to lecture about them. They start asking for your perspective on situations because they've glimpsed that your mind works differently than most. This is technique number 3 of 5, and it's the one that makes people start seeking your opinions even when you never offered them. Number 4, emotional climate control. Every room you enter has an emotional temperature. Most people walk into that temperature and let it determine how they feel and behave. They match the energy around them without realizing they're giving up their power to influence that energy. But there's a different approach that transforms you from someone who reacts to room dynamics into someone who shapes them. The most fascinating people in any gathering aren't the ones talking the loudest or telling the best stories. They're the ones who somehow shift the entire emotional climate just by being present. They walk into chaos and create calm without saying a word about the chaos. They enter boring situations and generate interest without trying to entertain anyone. This isn't about having a dominant personality or commanding attention. This is about understanding that every person in a room is unconsciously looking for emotional cues from everyone else. When you become the person who provides steady, intentional emotional signals, others naturally begin using you as their reference point for how to feel. Machiavelli mastered this during the most volatile political meetings of his time. When rooms full of angry nobles were shouting about military strategies, he would become unnaturally calm and speak in measured tones. When comfortable aristocrats were making lazy decisions about serious matters, he would introduce just enough tension through his posture and voice to make everyone more alert. He didn't match the room's energy. He redirected it. The technique works because of how emotional contagion operates in group settings. People unconsciously mirror the emotional states of those around them, but they mirror some people more than others. They're more likely to match the emotional tone of someone who appears confident, centered, and intentional about their energy. Here's how you implement this practically. When you walk into a meeting where everyone is stressed and talking quickly, you slow down your speech pattern and lower your voice slightly. Not dramatically enough to seem strange, but enough to create contrast. When you're in a social setting where everyone is being polite but boring, you introduce subtle intensity through more direct eye contact and slight pauses before responding to questions. The key is that your emotional adjustments should feel natural and confident, not forced or theatrical. You're not performing a different personality. You're consciously choosing what emotional frequency to operate on instead of letting the room choose for you. You become the person who brings calm to chaos and energy to stagnation. What makes this technique so powerful is that it positions you as someone who isn't controlled by external circumstances. People start to see you as centered, grounded, and mysteriously unaffected by the same things that throw everyone else off balance. They begin to wonder how you maintain that equilibrium and what other forms of self-control you might possess. This emotional leadership happens below the conscious level. People don't realize you're influencing the room's energy. They just notice that interactions feel different when you're present. Meetings become more productive. Conversations become more meaningful. Social gatherings become more enjoyable. And you become the person others want around when things get challenging or important. This is technique number 4 of 5, and it's the one that makes people start inviting you to situations where your presence alone adds value. Number 5, the future glimpse strategy. The most intriguing people you know aren't just interesting because of what they've done. They're fascinating because they seem to be moving towards something significant that the rest of us can't quite see. They carry themselves like someone who knows something about their future that others don't. And that energy of forward motion creates a magnetic pull that makes others want to be part of whatever's coming next. Most people talk about their plans in one of two ways. Either they share nothing about their future, which makes them seem directionless, or they explain every detail of their goals, which kills all mystery and makes their ambitions feel smaller than they probably are. But there's a third approach that creates fascination while building anticipation for who you're becoming. The future glimpse strategy is about referencing plans, projects, or knowledge that exist in your timeline without explaining what they actually involve. When someone asks about your current focus, you might mention that you're in the research phase of something that will become clearer in the coming months. Then ask about their current projects. You've established that you're working on something meaningful, but the specifics remain intriguingly undefined. Machiavelli used this technique throughout his career, especially during periods when he was out of official power. He would reference ongoing correspondence with various political figures, mention projects that were developing behind the scenes, and allude to opportunities that were taking shape, all without providing details that would allow others to fully understand his actual position or prospects. The psychology behind this technique is that humans are naturally drawn to people who seem to be in motion towards something important. We want to understand what drives someone who clearly has plans beyond what's immediately visible. We become curious about their trajectory and how we might fit into whatever they're building. Here's how you implement this naturally. When discussing your professional life, you might mention that you're working through some concepts that will probably turn into something more concrete after the current analysis phase is complete. In social settings, you could reference that you're exploring some opportunities that might shift your focus in interesting directions once certain pieces fall into place. The key is that these future references should feel genuine and grounded, not vague or fabricated. You're not making up fictional projects. You're simply framing real elements of your life in a way that suggests forward movement without revealing the complete picture. If you're learning new skills, that becomes research for future applications. If you're networking in a new industry, that becomes exploring possibilities that might develop into something significant. This technique transforms how people perceive your current activities. Instead of seeing you as someone doing ordinary things, they start seeing you as someone whose ordinary activities are building towards something extraordinary. Your learning becomes preparation. Your networking becomes strategy. Your current projects become foundations for bigger plans. People begin to wonder where your trajectory is leading and whether they should be paying more attention to your journey. They start seeing you as someone who might be worth knowing better because your future could become more interesting than your present. And that anticipation creates a form of mystery that makes every interaction with you feel like it might contain clues about something bigger. This is technique number 5 of 5, and it's the one that makes people start wondering if they should be taking you more seriously than they currently are. These 5 techniques work together to create something that money can't buy and status can't guarantee. They create genuine fascination. When you master the silence that makes others reveal themselves, share stories that leave people wanting more, demonstrate depth without lecturing, control emotional climates instead of being controlled by them, and reference a future that others can sense but not fully see, you become someone people remember long after everyone else has been forgotten. The beautiful truth about calibrated mystery is that it's not about hiding who you are. It's about revealing who you are in ways that create curiosity rather than satisfaction. It's about becoming someone whose complete story would be worth knowing, then choosing carefully how much of that story to share and when. Machiavelli understood that true power comes not from what people know about you, but from what they sense they don't know yet. Master these techniques and you'll discover that the most magnetic presence you can create is the one that leaves people wondering what depths they haven't explored yet. The next video the algorithm chose for you isn't random. It's your next tactical upgrade. Click it now and continue your silent ascent.